Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's stakeholder meeting for potential digital freeway billboard ordinance. We're just going to give folks a few more minutes to arrive in case anybody's running late. So please hang tight for the next few minutes. I do also want to let you all know that this meeting will be recorded, so that way staff and community members and the council can look back on this meeting at a future date. Okay, since I see that we have a few people who've been joining, just want to say again, thank you everybody for coming to today's stakeholder meeting for potential digital freeway billboard ordinance. We're waiting just a few extra minutes in case there's anybody running late. So please hang on tight for the next minute or so. I also do want to let you all know that this meeting is being recorded, so that way anybody who's not able to make it tonight or anybody who wants to watch the recording or the meeting in the future is able to do so. So again, just please hang on tight for the next minute while we let some additional folks arrive. Okay, seeing that it's now 4:06, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Again, thank you everybody for coming to today's Digital Freeway Billboards Ordinance Stakeholder meeting. We're very happy that you're all here. Um, I also do want to let you all know that the meeting is being recorded, so that way any folks who aren't able to attend today are able to listen in on the meeting in the future. So we're gonna first start off with some introductions of who is here from the city of Vacaville, along with some of the background of what this stakeholder meeting is really about and why the city is embarking on this effort. We'll then turn the floor over to you all to have some discussion about some of the different topics that we're looking at for a potential digital freeway billboards ordinance. Following that discussion session, which will really be the heart of today's meeting, staff will then introduce what the next steps are in this whole ordinance development process, followed by a session for you all to ask any questions and provide any comments that you have. So from the city of Vacaville here today, we have myself. My name is Noah Rambala, and I'm the assistant planner of the Vacaville Planning Division. We also have Albert Eno, the senior planner, and Tim Mongovon, the candidate. And then Aaron Morris is our community development director. Although I do not believe that he's present at this meeting at the moment. The purpose of today's stakeholder meeting is to formally introduce the proposed Digital Freeway Billboards Ordinance project and to really give you all as stakeholders an opportunity to provide feedback to the city and answer any questions that you all may have. We'll also be identifying what the steps in this whole development process is. Just for some background, in March of this year, the city of Vacaville received an application from Clear Channel Outdoor to convert one of their existing billboards into a digital freeway billboard. And this is an existing static billboard that's located along eastbound I-80 headed towards Sacramento near Kilkenny Road. So this is right as you're leaving Vacaville going past the road. And so staff reviewed that application and determined that it's prohibited under the current sign ordinance and that a zoning ordinance amendment would be required. And so in August of this year, the city council held a study session in order to gauge council interest in removing the prohibition on digital freeway billboards and to explore allowing digital freeway billboards. Council directed staff to explore allowing digital freeway billboards in Vacaville and to really seek community and stakeholder feedback regarding how Vacaville looks from the freeway, how the digital freeway billboards will look, any sort of design standards and location restrictions, and also the pros and cons of having digital billboards in Vacaville, along with any community benefits. And so now we're gonna turn it over to have some discussion. Staff will be introducing some guiding questions to help guide today's discussion. And then we'll turn it all over to attendees here today to provide some feedback and ask some questions. So the first topic that we're gonna start off with is regarding revenue. The guiding question that staff is seeking feedback on for revenue is whether or not monetary compensation to the city for converting existing static billboards into digital freeway billboards, should that consist of an annual payment or should it be more of a lump sum payment? And so if you have any feedback on this question, feel free to unmute your mics by using the microphone button to the bottom of the screen or by dialing star six if you're dialing it. Actually, since we do have quite a few attendees here today, if you're able to use the raise your hand feature by dialing star 9 or by using the button at the bottom of your screen, I would appreciate it so that I can go ahead and call. And so I see that Sarah has her hand raised. So Sarah, you have the floor.
Thank you, Noah. I'd like to note that our project as proposed is a conversion versus a net new digital billboard. I think that can be different and it has an annual payment or lump sum. It may have some implications for those. I know our proposal has been an annual payment. we'd certainly be receptive to a lump sum, but I did want to make sure that we noted that it was conversion versus net new billboards to the city.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah, for that clarification, for that feedback. Does anybody else want to provide any want to raise their hand and provide feedback or any questions on this topic, on this guiding question?
Noah, this is Stephen Power. Just a point of order. How do I raise my hand? And also, your audio is very poor.
Oh, thank you for that feedback. Are you better able to hear me now?
A little bit better, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Stephen. So if you're dialing on a phone, if you're using a phone, you're gonna dial *9. If you're on a computer, you need to use the reactions feature to raise your hand. But if you're unable to figure it out, unmuting and also just unmuting and speaking up, that can also help provide us input that you're looking to speak. But yeah, you have the floor.
Well, I don't see that icon that you're talking about. I've got, and I apologize to the other participants, but they've the participants chat, share screen, record, restrictions, apps, and whiteboards is the only, and start video, which is blocked, and then the mute.
Okay, that's okay, Stephen. Don't worry about raising the hand feature if you're unable to find it. But yeah, go ahead and
No, with respect to this, I don't have any specific comment. I think it you know, as a business person, I usually set my price and hope the other party, the counterparty, is amenable to it. So I would imagine that would be a negotiation between the city and the applicant.
All right, thank you, Stephen, for that comment. It's helpful feedback. Jeff, I also see that you're unmuted right now. Would you like to provide feedback on this question?
The only thing I would say is that it would be probably preferable for annual payments versus a lump sum to most applicants.
That's helpful feedback. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, we want to make sure that everybody who's attending the meeting today has an opportunity to provide feedback if they'd like to do so. So if you use the raise your hand feature or unmute, and I can go ahead and call on you if you'd like to provide feedback. And Sarah, I see your hand is raised. Is that a leftover from earlier, or do you have new comments?
It was left over. I deactivated it.
Okay. All right, so I'm not seeing anybody else unmuting or raising their hand. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next question. If you come up with thoughts later, towards the end of the presentation, I'll be displaying my email, so that way you can email myself if you have any additional comments or feedback that you'd like to provide later. And then we can also return to any questions or any of the discussion topics towards the end of the meeting too, if anybody has additional thoughts. But the next topic that we're going to move on to is location. Specifically, the city is looking for feedback on which areas stakeholders believe are best suited for digital billboards. The map on the right highlights some different areas that staff is looking at, specifically the Lagoon Valley area, the inner city between Alamo and Leisure Town roads, the Interstate 505 corridor, and also what we call the Northeast Growth area, which is the area past Leisure Town and between Leisure Town and Midway Road. And so we're looking to see which areas you all believe are best suited for digital billboards, and also if there's areas that you think may be over-concentrated. So again, if you'd like to provide feedback on this topic, feel free to unmute or use the raise your hand feature, and I can call on you. Jeff, I see you're unmuted. Would you like to provide some comments?
No, my comment would be that really anything on the freeway on 80 or 505 would make sense. Perhaps there's a little bit more inventory already concentrated near the Nut Tree area. But anything that is along the freeway with a new digital sign, either 80 or 505 would make sense. I don't think it has to be down to a certain category.
Okay, so just to summarize, you think that anything along I-80 or I-505 would be a suitable area?
Correct.
Awesome, thank you, Jeff. And then Sarah, I see that your hand is raised. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Yeah, I wanted to echo Jeff's comments. I think we agree with that general concept. I know that the Interstate 505 section is not currently covered as in the billboard ordinance that does exist. And I think that that's a wonderful opportunity for the city to open up that area.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, for that feedback. You are right that Interstate 505 currently doesn't have many, if any, billboards. So that is an area that staff is looking at. And so we are noting down your comments. Tom, I see that your hand is raised. You have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that 80 and 505 should be there, but I also wonder if staff has looked at the California Outdoor Advertising Act and how the existing billboards, any potential conversions or new boards would work into the spacing and requirements, zoning, etc. You are aware of the California Outdoor Advertising Act, correctly?
Yeah, thank you for that, Tom. We are aware of the Outdoor Advertising Act that the state has, and we have been working with Caltrans and will be continuing to work with Caltrans as we move forward with this process. And so we are aware, and we are trying to take that into consideration as we move forward. Okay, and Stephen, I see that your mic is unmuted, so go ahead.
Right. The only reason why I'm responding to this is that what is on the screen is best suited for digital billboards. As some on your staff know, I've been trying to get a message board on my property just off of I-80 for the last 12 years. So I'm looking for a gateway to entitlement, but I also have opinions about the existing displays, which is one of the reasons why I'm here.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Stephen, for that. So I'm not seeing anybody else who's unmuted or has their hand raised. Is there anybody else who would like to provide feedback on this topic? If there's any areas that they think are best suited or currently over concentrated with billboards? Jeff, I see your mic's unmuted again. Did you have something else to add?
Just on this, wondering if the city, is there consideration just for city-owned property development? Is it for private property development? Has there been any discussion about how the city wants to move forward as far as allowing new digital billboards?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. Right now, we're just looking at developing the standards for what the billboards would look like. That is definitely something that we are considering and would be considered as part of the overall process. And so that's why we're trying to reach out to stakeholders and to community members at this moment to get that feedback and to really see how should we best be moving forward, whether or not it be only on public or only on private property, or either. So it's definitely something that we're considering. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other unmuted mics or hands raised. So I think now's a good time to move on to our next topic, which would be regarding static billboard removal or standard billboard removal. On the right, we have a map of some of the existing billboards that currently exist in Vacaville and the surrounding area. And so staff is seeking feedback on whether or not you all as stakeholders would be open to removing standard billboards in exchange for the conversion to digital billboards. And if so, how many and which ones? And so if you'd like to provide feedback on this item, feel free to raise your hand or unmute. So Jeff, I see that your mic's unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I guess the question would be, is the city interested in adding more billboards versus converting or removal, more of a relocation program that a lot of cities engage in, where you cannot increase the amount of current footprint of signage. So are you looking to add more or remove more? I mean, what was the idea that the city's looking at?
Yeah, so the city currently is looking at just removal. We're of course exploring and open to looking at different options, but right now the focus has mainly been on removal. And then Sarah, I see that your hand is raised. So go ahead, you have the floor.
Yes. Clear Channel successfully engaged in a relocation program with the city of Vacaville previously, where we took down really all of our inventory around the city of Vacaville. What we're proposing with this conversion is that we will remove structures that are on the highway. We are fully in support of removing structures and engaging in a relocation process for our conversion. And I think the other piece of it, that it opens up a revenue potential for the city that doesn't currently exist with the static billboard that we are proposing to convert.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Sarah, for the feedback. Is there anybody else? Chris, I see that your mic's unmuted.
Yes, thank you. So we have one billboard in Vacaville, so a requirement to remove would put us at a distinct disadvantage.
Okay, yeah, that is good feedback to know. Chris, thank you for that. Do you mind sharing which company or billboard operator you work for?
Sure, I'm with Meadow Outdoor Advertising.
Thank you. And then Stephen, I see that your mic's unmuted. Would you like to provide comments?
Yes, on behalf of a company which I'm affiliated with, not my other company, but Terra Properties and Investment Corporation, we have a freeway visible display right on the freeway at Bella Vista. And I'd like to explore converting that to digital. I don't know what the economics are or whether the city would permit it, but we're not in the digital signboard business. I'd like to be able to advertise the tenants in the center, which Terra owns, and there's a number of them, and everybody seems to be interested in advertising. So I just wanted to throw that out. Like the other person that just mentioned, Mr. Zukin, I believe, we've only got one, and so if we remove it, that doesn't to get a digital display, that doesn't make much sense.
Okay, no, that's helpful feedback too. Thank you, Stephen, for that. Jeff, sorry, I see your mic's unmuted.
Yeah, I just was gonna comment on, I think it was Stephen that just made that last comment. Wouldn't that fall under a on-premise signage? Where you would, if it's on the property of a mall or whatever it could be, then you would just be using it for on-premise for the local advertisers in the center?
Yeah, so the city currently allows freeway signs for commercial centers and also planned sign programs. And so I'm not too familiar with the site that Mr. Power is referring to, but it's likely that that area would qualify for one of those. However, the city's current sign ordinance does not allow most types of digital signs.
Thank you.
And Sarah, I see that your hand is up again. If you'd like to provide additional comments, please do so.
I did. For parties who may not have the takedown opportunity that some of the other companies who maybe are more established in the Vacaville market do, some markets, and South San Francisco comes to mind, offer an opportunity for companies to pay an in lieu of payment, which would be a lump sum payment up front to compensate the city for the lack of takedowns. I think that's something that's becoming and is sort of standard across the board in the industry. So I just wanted to point that out for the city's sake.
Yeah, no, that's definitely very helpful feedback, Sarah. Thank you for providing that comment. Do you think you could provide more information about what you've seen based on your experience of those types of in lieu fees?
I certainly can. I know that we have a couple of digital billboards up in South San Francisco, and we used that pathway for our second board. So I'm happy to provide you with that information. That's the one that comes to mind, but I can go back to our team and see if we have other examples for you.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we'd appreciate that. And then of course, our contact info will be at the end of the meeting, will be displayed there. And I believe you have my contact information as well, so.
I do. I just wanted to cite that as an opportunity for some of the smaller providers who might not have a takedown in the market as a way to enter it if they wanted to.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Sarah, for that. Tom, I see that your hand's raised, so go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of echo what Chris Zukin said. We're a family-owned and operated billboard business in Northern California. We have a few structures in Vacaville. Having to take down one or two would be significant to us. I've never heard of the in lieu fee. We've been doing this for quite a while. We're not clearly as large as Clear Channel, Outfront, or Lamar, but it is something I'd like to know more about. So if you can get that information, it'd be nice if you send a recap of this meeting to send out whatever information is provided regarding, and we'll have our people look into it too. But if you could send that out, it'd be great.
Yeah, and just to foreshadow on some of the next steps, we are working on compiling all of the feedback that we get from these community outreach events and the stakeholder meeting. And so that'll definitely be something that's available for review at a future date. And then Tom, if you don't mind, do you mind sharing which company you're affiliated with?
Sure, I'm the owner of Veal Outdoor Advertising.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Tom. And then Stephen, I see that your mic's unmuted. Go ahead. We also do want to make sure that everybody does have a chance to speak. So I just want to put that out there as well. So Stephen, go ahead. And then
I apologize. That's operator error. I somehow unmuted it, but I don't have anything to add.
Oh, okay. Okay, is there anybody else who would like to speak on this topic before we move on to the next one? Okay, seeing no other hands raised or mics unmuted, we're going to move to the next topic, which is regarding placemaking. Specifically, city staff is looking to see your feedback on whether or not there should be special theming for signs. And if so, are there any construction limitations or considerations that you all are aware of based on your experience with outdoor advertising? Jeff,
Can you
go ahead.
be more clear on what where you're seeking the information here on the placemaking? Is that, looking for the design of the structure and having Vacaville being placed on it? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so that's a good example. So either like cities, designs for billboard structures that would represent city theming or city culture, those types of things that you're describing.
Yeah, that's being done all over the Bay Area. I mean, you could go to city of San Carlos, which has multiple digital signs. They all say, "Welcome to city" or San Carlos. There's signs in Fairfield. You can look at your neighbor as far as that, but it's usually on city-owned properties, but it doesn't always have to be. But it's usually something that the cities want.
Yeah, I'd add to that, to Jeff's comment, that you want to make sure that both you're leveraging the city's name and identifying it, but that you're not adding too much to the sign to detract from the messaging that's on the sign. So I think there's a balance to be struck there. But I think that it is pretty standard to add a city's name.
All right, thank you, Jeff and Sarah, for that feedback. It's very helpful. Anybody else want to provide feedback on this topic? Okay, so I'm not seeing any other mics or hands raised. So we're going to move on to the next topic, which is performance standards. We're seeking feedback on what times of the day should digital freeway billboards be allowed to operate? How long should each billboard message be displayed? And should brightness be adjusted to match the time of day and the season? As we mentioned earlier, we are aware that Caltrans has their own standards, and as we move forward in this process, we will be working with Caltrans to ensure consistency. But we do want to get stakeholder and community feedback on this. So that's why we are posing the question. Jeff, I see that your mic's open, so go ahead, you have the floor.
Sure. In order to optimize the advertising to the revenue to generate, you're going to want the sign to be operating 24/7. It's standard for each message to be displayed for 8 seconds before moving on to the next display. Another standard is that it's usually 8 advertisers per face. And the brightness is always adjusted based on the time of day. That's automatically done with the screens.
Yeah, it's good to know. Thank you, Jeff, for that.
Just to add to Jeff's comment, it's somewhat counterintuitive, but the signs are brighter during the day so that they're legible and readable by vehicles during the brightest hours of the day. And then there's actually less energy usage and less brightness to the signs in the evening.
No, that's helpful context. Thank you, Sarah, for that. Stephen, I see that your mic's unmuted. Go ahead.
In principle, I don't disagree with any of the previous speakers, although I note that on one of the city's boards, or it's actually probably a private party board over by the auto mall, it was running like 24/7 full bright. And because I'm been interested in this aspect of advertising, I called the PD, said, hey, get these guys to turn it down. And there didn't seem to be any city mechanism for monitoring that the performance standards were being adhered to. So I guess that's the only thing I would add. If you've got the standard, who enforces it?
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Stephen. We're definitely.
If I could add one more thing,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
It's particularly good or important because the the auto mall is next to the Nut Tree Airport, and any overly bright sign could conceivably be an interference with nighttime navigation of pilots trying to get into the airport.
No, that's a very important consideration as well. Thank you, Stephen, for highlighting that. Does anybody else want to provide feedback or comments on this item? Okay, so I'm seeing no mics unmuted, no hands raised. So we're going to move on to our second to last topic, our penultimate topic, which is development standards. We're looking for feedback on how tall digital freeway billboard structure should be, how much distance should be required between the billboards, if there's any type of landscaping that should be installed around the billboard structure, and then also if there's any limitations that you're aware of from Caltrans that you believe that the city should be aware of as well as we're going through it with this process. So Tom, I see that your hand's raised. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I'll go back to the Caltrans Outdoor Advertising Act, it gives the spacing requirements for both digital and statics, the type of zoning it needs to be in. All that information is there in the Caltrans regulations. Height depends on the location, what's around it, how, you know, if there a building next to it, is there trees, is there whatever. And then landscaping, clearly, none of us want a bunch of landscaping that's going to grow up and block the sign. So, but there, you know, should be something nice and tasteful around the bottom. So when people are driving by on the side street or wherever, it just doesn't look like a pole in the ground. And pretty much all billboard companies operate under the best practices. Well, not pretty much, everybody does, under the best practices of the Outdoor Advertising Association of America and the California State Outdoor Association. So you're not going to just have a company put a sign up there that doesn't look good or meet the requirements of the Outdoor Advertising Act.
Thank you for that, Tom. That's it's good that you're highlighting that for us. Sarah, I see your hand is raised. You want to provide some comments?
I just wanted to note that we have an existing structure and we're proposing to remove our printed display and replace and the associated pieces of the structure, and then really just to hang the digital panels onto the sign. So we're not proposing to really raise the height limit of the signs that have already been entitled by the city.
Thanks for that clarification, Sarah. Anybody else wanting to provide feedback on this topic? Okay, going back to something that Tom, that you mentioned earlier, you mentioned that that you're not a fan of landscaping that would block the sign. Obviously, that's something that the city would need to be considering as we're developing these standards. Are there any sort of like low-level landscaping that that you and other folks here would be open to, such as like shrubs or other types of low-lying landscaping? Is that something that's should be considered?
I mean, I guess you're asking me. We have 2 digital signs on city leased properties. Both of them have some general landscaping around the bottom, some manzanita bushes, this and that, but you can't put it too close because you got to have access. But yeah, I don't think anybody, and I haven't seen every billboard in Northern California, but I don't think anybody should be opposed to putting something. But you also have to remember, like at Sarah's board, the Clear Channel board out there on 80s, you know, there's no available water for irrigation for that sign if you were to put a bunch of shrubs at the bottom. So it almost has to be a site by site, you know, decision. You got it all again is going to be pinned on the location. If you put one where the Nut Tree Plaza just replaced their sign, there's water irrigation there. You can do something really nice. But if you have one out by between Midway and 505, there's no irrigation out there. So putting a bunch of shrubs out there is going to, you know, require a lot of maintenance that sign companies aren't going to want to do.
Yeah, that's helpful feedback. Thank you, Tom. Sarah, I see that your hand is raised. Did you still want to add something, or is that left over? Sarah, are you there?
I am sorry, it was left over.
Okay, no worries. Stephen, I see that your mic's unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not principally in the sign business, but I am in the real estate business, and landscaping is really problematic. And I can't, just taking the side of the industry, they want people to look at the advertising and not be admiring the landscaping. And to me, just keeping it mowed, keeping the weeds mowed, and keeping the trash and junk and homeless encampments and stuff like that from around the perimeter would be as a resident of Vacaville and a taxpayer, I think that would be adequate. But if the industry wants to have landscaping, of course, that's their choice. But I would also agree with Mr. Jackson that water and irrigation is going to be problematic, and it's also in Vacaville really expensive.
No, that's helpful feedback. Thank you for that, Stephen. Anybody else wanting to provide comments on this item before we move to our last topic?
I did want to provide a comment in that in discussions with council members, members of city staff, it's something that's been a recurring theme has been talking about the gateways and the freeway exits
throughout Vacaville. And I wanted to just point out that the revenue produced by digital conversion or other types of billboard development on the highway could provide a funding source for improving the presence of Vacaville as a city, maybe reestablishing or recreating the gateways to the city and changing the freeway experience that drivers have when they're traveling through the city.
That's not exactly related to, certainly Clear Channel's function as a billboard company, but it's something that
the revenue that we could provide the city could help the city, produce those types of gateways.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. That's definitely something that we're wanting to look at as we move forward with this process. Okay, so seeing no other hands raised, no other mics unmuted, we're going to move to our last topic, which is regarding planning entitlements. We're seeking feedback on whether or not stakeholders such as yourselves should be conducting preliminary community outreach before applying for a digital freeway billboard, and whether or not you would all be willing to execute a development agreement with the city in order to operate a digital freeway billboard. And then lastly, who the decision maker for any sort of applications should be, whether that be a staff level review with the director or planning commission and city council entitlements. So Jeff, I see that you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Sure, I would say that as far as community outreach, that's usually, I would suggest that that be done by the city and not the stakeholders. The development agreement or a lease agreement is the norm. The development agreement is usually used when we have a lease with a private property owner. And then for the city to participate in any kind of a revenue generation, we would need a development agreement, which is done quite often. Decision maker, I would say the industry would love to say that the community development director could make that call, but I think we all know that that's not what happens. It's the planning commission and then on to the city council for a final vote. But if there's a choice, we would love not to have to go through all different departments to get approval.
All right, thank you for that feedback, Jeff. Sarah, I see that you're unmuted.
Yes, I just wanted to add that for our proposal, we're suggesting takedown, so that would imply a relocation agreement, but then also to enter into a development agreement with the city.
Thank you for that clarification, Sarah. Anybody else wanting to provide feedback on our last item before we move on to discussing what the next steps would be? Stephen, I see that your mic's unmuted.
I agree that the city council is where the buck stops, but I think the professional planning staff has an enormous role to play in sort of polling what other folks have done and validating the requests of the applicants and that sort of thing. Because in my experience, the council just doesn't have a lot of advertising experience, period, and it's going to need some guidance from its professional staff.
Thanks for that feedback.
Thank you.
'Cause, Okay, so I'm not seeing any other mics unmuted or hands raised. So we're gonna move on to the next steps, and then after that, we'll have an additional time for questions and comments, if anybody else has any. But for the next steps, we're gonna continue to collect public feedback, so please continue to email any comments or questions that you may have related to digital freeway billboards and the possibility of having them in Vacaville. My contact info will be on the next slide here. But we are continuing to collect that public feedback before we return to City Council on December 12th for a City Council meeting regarding options for a proposed digital freeway billboards ordinance. And so that City Council meeting will be on December 12th at 6 p.m. at the City Council chambers here at Vacaville City Hall. You all will be provided with notice before that meeting, but also we encourage you all to attend if you have any interest in this project. Following direction from City Council will begin the environmental analysis and any staff reports and draft ordinances before returning for public hearings with the Planning Commission for recommendation and the City Council for a final decision. And so that concludes our presentation here tonight. My contact info is right there on the screen. Again, my name is Noah Rumbawa and my email is right there. You can also give me a call if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to provide. But we would also like your comments and questions in writing, so that way they can be provided to council at that City Council meeting. And then, of course, if you'd like more information about this whole digital freeway billboards effort, we do have a website on our city's website, which is located, the link to which is at the bottom of the screen here. And so, yeah, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to raise your hand or unmute and I can call on you. And if anybody also wants to go back to some of the previous discussion topics, we can also do so as well. Okay, so I'm not seeing any mics unmuted and no hands raised. So if there's no questions and no additional comments, we're gonna end tonight's stakeholder meeting. Again, thank you all so much for coming today. We did receive a lot of good feedback. That will be helpful as we return to council later this year. So again, thank you all for coming and have a great evening. Thank you.